There's an interesting thing that I watched on YouTube. One of the channels I pay close attention to is the Real News Network, and there's a gentleman called Dimitri Lascaris. He's Canadian, and he works for the Real News Network, and they sent him on assignment to Venezuela. Now, he was there to cover the protests that are happening, and this will be, I think, like 3 or 4 hours old. It's been posted on YouTube, but there is a stark contrast to what the corporate media in the West has been putting out, especially in the United States, versus what the actual realities with boots on the ground is showing. There's tens of thousands of people in Caracas doing protests, and they're on both the Maduro side and on the asinine criminal that the U.S. is backing, as well as many of the Western, as well as South and Central American countries are backing. So, the narrative is that Maduro is a violent dictator and a despot, and that he's using his military and police to go around killing people and oppressing and suppressing demonstrations. But here was the interesting thing: there was absolutely no indication of any military or police in riot gear at this protest, and it looked like a 4th of July, a crowd of, going to a 4th of July fireworks or a Memorial Day parade. That's what the atmosphere looked like. And this is they're covering this, and they're showing video, and they're panning around. You don't see there was no police. Dimitri actually states there were a few, but he was more like crowd control with nothing else. So I find this a stark contradiction to what the mainstream narrative, the corporate mainstream narrative, is going on about. And you have the Trump administration and the U.S. federal administration talking about sending the possibility of sending military forces down into Venezuela to effect regime change. You have groups like the Lima Group, which is a group of well-to-do and the supposed economic experts, and the Lima Group is directly connected to a Chicago think tank who is connected to the fossil fuel and other banks and so on and so forth. So, and the Lima Group is a group of people who have direct connections to this whole right-wing organization, and they're backed by the right-wingers down the right-wing elite, financially elite down Central and South America. As a matter of fact, that Juan Guaido has connections to the Lima Group, which is connected to the Chicago boys. So you have all this going on. So this talk of sending U.S. military down there presents a huge problem for me, and it should present a huge problem to the military, U.S. military, because one of the things that I know is that Maduro has actually given out assault weapons to the citizens. Now, he got 6 million votes in Venezuela, and the military has been handing out the Venezuelan military has been handing out AK-47s and all sorts of other weapons to civilians. Now, this is something that the corporate media in the West has not talked about. So we're talking. They handed out millions of these weapons, as well as ammunition and training on the use of these weapons. And so, if we do send military down there, there is going to be a catastrophic amounts of death and destruction. Maduro, for all his faults, and he has some, he has definitely mismanaged the country, economically speaking. But being an oppressive and suppressive and dictatorial, and a dictator is not one of those. He's flawed in how he handles economics down there, but that just means that he's not really a capable leader when it comes down to that. Of course, it's been vastly assisted and vastly driven by the fossil fuel and other industries of the West to get control of the fossil fuels, the mineral rights, the food, exotic foods, and other stuff. Check out the Banana Republic. What the Banana Republic Wars was all about. It's about getting control of bananas and pineapples and some of the other exotic fruits and vegetables. So it's the agro industry in the West that's involved as well. So it's an old story that's been going on. The true dictators are the U.S. and Western nations, and those puppets who have financial incentives and interests, and don't care about human rights, don't care about completely being oppressive and dictatorial. Take prime example, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. Brazil already has a ton of issues now, mostly financially, and now Bolsonaro is going to just ramp that up, and and Bolsonaro is backing and talking about invasion in Colombia, which is a U.S. Basically you might as well Colombia might as well be a territory, a colonial territory, because they basically do what Washington and the corporate interests dictates. So there is the biggest losers in this, and losers I'm talking about in how they're gonna the Venezuelans. They're gonna lose everything, including their lives, And if we do send the military down, there is going to be catastrophic amounts of death and destruction. And U.S. Military forces will die in the thousands, but the Venezuelans will die in the millions. And, you know, there's a global immigration issue that's going on, but that's that the West is all crying about, and it's something that's created by the West. They go in and destabilize things, start killing and causing others to take violent predatory action within their own countries, and so people lose even the smallest amount of ability to sustain themselves and be. And so what they do is they end up trying to go somewhere where they think they won't get. They won't. They'll be able to live and won't have to put up with all that. And it's the whole immigration issue is a Western thing. It's the West like to say it's oppressive governments of there, but that's a complete and utter bullshit, because that's not the case. I mean, take for instance, interestingly, I don't know how many of you know this, but the French Foreign Legion has troops all over the place, primarily in Africa. And the French Foreign Legion basically does what the U.S. has been doing and keeps doing. And the reason why is the French has a lot of colonial action, trying to keep their colonial power in Africa, just like they did in Vietnam. The French wanted to keep their colonial power in Vietnam, and that's what basically was the entire Vietnam War. It was the U.S. backing the French, the West propping up the West. So you had millions of Vietnamese and Cambodians and as well as Thai. There were millions of deaths, all because the colonialism that was supposed to have disappeared but hasn't. So the West is directly culpable for the death, the oppression, and the dictatorial rulerships that popped up. And they're trying to do it again in Venezuela, as they've already successfully done in many of the South American countries. They've instilled dictators like Bolsonaro. And Bolsonaro is just one. Every single South American and Central American state which has backed the coup is a satellite is a satellite territory of the U.S. and Western interests. That's why you have the West backing what the U.S. Is saying. And it's not the U.S. population, it's the criminals, that criminal dictatorship that's called the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. The big honchos and the corporations of the West. That is what's going on. So, if you can, check out the Real News Network. It's called the realnews.com. They recently turned it to Real News Network. But, keep an eye on the Real News, because on YouTube, they are a fantastic source of information. And unlike the unlike corporate media, they actually do deep investigations. Uh, and even the independent, the indie media, they far exceed all of them for the level of investigation and research into this. Uh, uh, Chris Hedges is great and about what he does. Abby Martin is great at what she does. The Real News is on par with them, if not even better. Uh, the other one that you should look at, and this is for for the domestic side of the independent indie news channels, is Ring of Fire. They do a phenomenal amount of reporting about the corporate and political crimes committed. And one of the great things is they have a gentleman named Mike Papantonio, and he is a corporate he's a corporate criminal lawyer, uh, and he covers corporate crime. He actually is involved with a lot of civil mass civil lawsuits, and he's much like remember the I forget the name of the movie, but it was played by John Travolta, uh, where he played a lawyer and he was doing defense class action, and just like what's the other one that was the woman that wasn't a lawyer but she got a job on a law firm, and she covered corporate crimes being committed, and they made a big movie with her, and that was done with the woman from Pretty Woman. Um, I can't remember her name, but these that is what Mike Papantonio does. He actually has a show on RT, America's Lawyer, and he does it, and he's connected to a lot of big firms uh, that do this, and they have a network and that do this. But Mike Papantonio brings it out in light, and it's often is featured on Ring of Fire. And then there's Top Class Action, which is also a almost like a newsletter, informative newsletter system, and they're on the Ring of Fire often, and they're another network of lawyers covering corporate crimes. So the Real News and the Ring of Fire, two great sources uh, that really should be looked at. And Telesur is another one that you should check out because Telesur is covers South and Central America for politics and economics, but they also cover outside. But they're they're another great source. Perhaps not on par with the Real News, and but they are certainly far more objective and far better than the criminal organizations calling themselves news in the West. So hopefully you'll check them out. As a matter of fact, my recently posted video that I did live about what happened. Uh, I get what happened to me in Thorndale, Pennsylvania, is stuff that I got from Ring of Fire, uh, things that I get from the Real News, uh, as well as this particular day was because something I saw on the Bernie Sanders channel on YouTube, and Bernie covers this sort of stuff too. Um, but there's a lot of collaboration from multiple indie news channels, as well as international news channels that I keep track of that verifies many of the things that I talk about on my own channel. So those are a few recommendations, and I also would advise the military, and not just, and I'm not talking about the military leadership, but the military itself, U.S. military personnel that should Washington or the DOD send give orders to send you down there. I would suggest that you not suggest. I demand that you basically tell them to fuck off, give them a big fu, and tell them no. I'm not going down there to fucking kill people and die and possibly die myself, so you can get rich off my own life and fuck me over. That's what you need to do. Uh, as a military personnel, you are supposed to defend us, not enrich the criminals in the United States and the corporations, nor the politicians who are bribed, who are being bribed and being paid by these criminal organizations. So, U.S. military, if you are given orders to go down there, tell your generals, tell the president, and tell the corporations and the bought and paid for criminal politicians to go fuck off, because that's what you need to do. Just like the police and law enforcement and judicial system should be saying fuck off. I'm not carrying out illegitimate policies and legislation which goes against the public good, which are completely illegal. All right, thanks for your time.